Hello, my name is Yui and today I'm going to be sharing 5 vegan recipes through a what I eat in a day. Because I love to cook, I had an amazing time making this video, so I hope you enjoy, and without further ado, let's begin. So for breakfast today, I'm thinking of making some vegan miso soup along with maki sushi. So for the miso soup, I'm going to first allow my dried seaweed and dried mushroom soak up in my water for around 30 minutes. And while I wait for that, I'm going to be chopping up my vegetables. Today I'm using carrots as well as daikon, which is also known as Japanese radish. And as for tofu, I'm going to be using half a block of soft tofu and chopping that up into bite-sized cubes. So now that I am done with that, I'm going to start boiling my dashi. And now that my dashi is at a point where it's right about to boil, I'm going to add in my daikon and carrots. After my soup starts to boil, I'm going to take out my mushroom and seaweed and add in my tofu. So at this point, I'm going to lower my heat down to simmer and add in my miso. The general rule is 1 tablespoon of miso paste to 1 cup of liquid, however that depends on everyone's preferences. So I'm actually going to add back in the seaweed and mushroom after I slice it into little pieces because I feel like it's just a waste to throw it out, and I actually really like how they taste. And that is my recipe for vegan miso soup. I love to drink this in the morning, especially on colder days, because it warms up my body and also provides it with a lot of nutrients through the miso and tofu as well as the vegetables. And now moving on to maki sushi. I'm going to start off by putting my brown rice into a bowl and pouring around a tablespoon of sushi vinegar on top. Using a wooden spoon, I'm going to mix that up and let it cool down on the side. While I wait for my rice to cool down, I'm going to cut my carrots, cucumbers, and avocados into thin slices. My final ingredient is a crispy nori sheet, and I'm going to be using a bamboo roller to roll out my sushi. Some soy sauce and wasabi right here to dip my rolled sushi into. So it is now lunchtime and I am going to be making an eggplant kabayaki bowl. So I'm going to be using 2 Japanese eggplants and I'm going to season it how I would a unagi bowl. We're going to start off by peeling the eggplant skin off and microwaving it until it becomes soft. And once that's done, we're going to be cutting through the middle of the eggplant so that it opens up sort of to mimic how a eel would look opened up. So my eggplant is now done and it sort of looks like, it doesn't look like unagi, but it's gonna get there soon. So now I'm going to gather the ingredients for the kabayaki sauce. I'm going to be gathering around 2 tablespoons of sugar with 3 tablespoons of soy sauce and 3 tablespoons of mirin. Now I'm moving on to cooking the eggplant pieces. After lightly oiling the frying pan, I'm going to add in my 2 pieces of eggplants. Making sure that it doesn't stick too much to the surface, I'm going to continue flipping it until it becomes a little bit brown on both sides. After lowering the heat a little bit, I'm going to add in my sauce mixture. And I'm just going to simmer this until the sauce thickens up a little bit. To a bowl, I'm going to add my brown rice and eggplant unagi pieces. So I have my eggplant kabayaki here. I added some sansho powder on top, and I also have pickled plum umeboshi as well as homemade yuzu kosho. Hello, so for dinner I'm going to be making a vegan soba noodle soup dish. So soba is a really popular dish in Japan. It is very easy to make and I feel like it's a lot of people's comfort foods. It is, at least for me, and this is sort of similar to the miso soup. I'm going to be using the same mushroom and seaweed mixture. So I actually have been leaving this in here for around 5 hours, but if you don't have time, it's totally not necessary. You just need to leave it here for maybe 30 minutes or so. But before I actually start to prepare the soba noodles, I'm going to make my toppings first. So usually for the toppings, I would just put a tempura, usually either shrimp or vegetable. But because I don't have tempura today, I'm going to be topping my soba with tofu and spinach. For the tofu, I'm actually going to be using half of what is left over from the miso soup. I have to let the water drain out, so I'm gonna place something heavy on top and let it drain for 30 minutes. While I'm waiting for my tofu, this would be a great time to prepare your dashi if you haven't already, and also prepare other toppings. So I actually have this from the maki sushi this morning. This is the spinach, so I have a little bit here which I'm going to use. And since I'm also going to top my soba noodles with green onions, I'm gonna slice that up right now. Alright, so now that my toppings are ready to go, I'm going to start making my soup while I still wait for my tofu. So here I have around 2 cups of dashi, and I'm going to transfer this into a pot and bring it to a boil. And right before it comes to a boil, I'm going to remove my mushroom and seaweed and add in a tablespoon of soy sauce, a tablespoon of mirin, and half a tablespoon of sake. Alright, so now that my soup is boiling, I'm going to reduce the heat down to a simmer and cut the mushrooms that I took out earlier. After I am done with that, I'm going to start prepping my tofu. So for the tofu, I'm going to be cutting it into 8 equal pieces and then coating it lightly with potato starch. And after that is done, I'm going to be lightly frying it in oil. Okay, so now that my tofu is ready, I'm going to start boiling my soba. And because my packaging for soba says to boil it for 4 minutes, I'm actually going to boil it for only 3.5 minutes because I'm eventually going to put it into a hot soup. And for soba, it is very important to rinse it after it is done cooking. So afterwards, I'm going to rinse it well with cold water. While my soba noodles are boiling, I'm actually going to take this time to reheat my soup as well. Now it is time to assemble. So first, I'm going to put my noodles into the bowl, and then I'm going to spoon in my soup carefully because it is hot. And then finally, I'm going to put my toppings. Very excited. The mushroom really did its job. The tofu is so good. Fun fact, I used to hate mushrooms, but now I love it. So good. Wow. So it is finally time for dessert, and today I'm going to be making Mitarashi dango, which is essentially mochi covered in a sweet soy sauce glaze. This is one of my favorite desserts to make because it's really easy and I just love mochi. I'm obsessed with mochi. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So first I'm going to start a pot of boiling water for the mochi. And while I wait for that to boil, I'm going to stir my mochi ingredients together. So for the mochi itself, we're going to need some joshinko, which is a type of Japanese rice flour, as well as shiratamako, which is a glutinous rice flour. And because today I'm only going to be making this dessert for myself, I'm going to be using 1/3 cup of each flour. And to those rice flours, I'm going to be mixing in around 3.5 tablespoons of warm water. And this will also depend on what kind of climate you live in. So if you live in a more humid climate, then you're going to be needing less water. And if you live in a more drier climate like I do, then you're probably going to need more water. So I might be using a little bit more than 3.5 tablespoons. We'll see how it goes. So now I'm going to separate my dough into balls with around a 1.5-inch diameter. And for any cracks on the surface, I'm just going to smooth it out using my finger and some water. After my pot of water starts to boil, I'm going to add in my mochi and wait until it floats to the top. After my mochi starts to float, I'm going to wait an additional 2 minutes until transferring it into an ice bath. And for the sweet soy sauce glaze, I'm going to be using 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of potato starch, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of mirin, and around a 1/3 cup of water. And the reason why we're using potato starch is because we want the soy sauce glaze to thicken up so that it can be more of a glaze rather than a liquidy sauce. This is a totally optional step, but because I have a torch, I'm going to be torching the surface. Next, I'm going to skewer on the mochi balls onto wooden sticks. And for the final step, I'm going to be distributing the glaze evenly on top of the mochi. Oh my god, it's so chewy too. Wow.